Today is tempo 3 miles at a 9:30 pace.
I don't know if you can do it.
I can do it.
You think you can do it?
Yeah, that's not going to be a problem.
9:30 pace, pretty fast.
I did 9:45 on accident last Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem.
Depends on how short your shorts are.
They're going to be so short, Daniel. Okay. Let's scrap all that.
You gonna start your timer?
Oh, that's a good idea.
If you start your timer, we might go an hour and a half longer than we intend to, but might as well.
I have to do this properly for the managing of the stages.
I'm curious if anybody listening to the show picked up on that big deal we made out of using the timer, and then that being by far the longest show we've ever had.
It just goes to show that we should use the timer more often.
Maybe.
Oh, well.
Oh, well.
Daniel, do you think I'm fancy enough that I could pull off earrings?
You don't really seem like an earring kind of guy to me, but what makes you ask that question?
I don't know. I met a gentleman today who had earrings. And then I thought about how a lot of people have earrings. And then I thought about, well, what if I had earrings? But then I thought that, I don't feel like a fancy person. I do like wearing my short shorts when I run. But I don't know. I'm not really like a cowboy kind of person, but I do have cowboy boots.
Oh,
and
if you were a cowboy person, you definitely would not wear earrings.
I feel like you can't be a cowboy person and an earring wearing person at the same time.
That Venn diagram has zero overlap.
Well, it's got some overlap, but I don't want to be in that overlap personally. It's for some people, just not for me. Irregardlessly. That's how, yeah. I don't know. Probably not. No, it's not.
I just don't think so. It doesn't really seem like you to me.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to think about it a little more. Okay, second question. We're recording this episode too close to the other episode, and so this is our second episode that's going to happen before race week, which is a lot of pre-race content for what's going to air after the first race of the second race of the season. Point is, the Australian Grand Prix is in like 3 days, Daniel. It's so stupid.
That's pretty close.
It's so close. And I don't know what hat to wear.
What are your choices?
As well determined from those who are regular listeners of the show. Generally, when I do or don't wear my McLaren hat, McLaren does or doesn't win.
There's no correlation. It's just that sometimes you do and don't wear your hat, and sometimes they do and don't win. Is that what you're saying?
Roughly.
Yeah.
Now that I know that I have this power, and then I have a Ferrari hat, which I'm wearing today, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I'm considering staying up late to watch the race live.
Oh.
Because it's at like 11 p.m. our time, and it's
that
like the first
achievable.
Race of the season. And I'm like super
Is it on
excited
Friday or
about it.
Saturday?
It's on Saturday.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking about doing it, but I don't know. What do? Do I wear my Ferrari hat or do I wear my McLaren hat?
And you're planning on supporting Ferrari this year, right? You know what you said?
Well, I'm really hoping that Charles Leclerc wins the WDC, but also I wouldn't be upset if Lando Norris won. I'm still a bit of a Lando Norris fan.
1 foot on each bandwagon.
It really depends upon how well each team's doing this year.
Yeah, there's the truth.
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm so torn.
It might have to be a game time decision.
I don't think I can put that much pressure on myself. I need you to decide.
I think you're in trouble then, because I don't know what to tell you to do.
Just pick Ferrari or McLaren. Do you like the orange team or do you like the red team? Sorry, papaya.
Yes, papaya. I think since you generalize them to orange, I don't think you can disrespect them by wearing their hat. I think you have to go Ferrari.
Okay, fine. I'll wear my Ferrari hat. My Ferrari hat is really good looking.
Yeah. It is. It's not red. I might have expected a Ferrari hat to be red.
I think it's like, I don't remember if it's the one from Miami or Singapore. I don't remember, but it's like, looks like a beach hat.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's not tie-dye, but it's kind of a similar sort of vibe.
Okay. So
it could, I will say, if you wore that hat all the time, you could potentially be an earring person.
Yeah, that hat would go with the earrings.
Yeah, for sure. Not a cowboy hat, but that hat would.
No, I don't own a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another time.
Yes. A different pre-show.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel,
And I'm Lucas.
and we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
So I finally developed my first roll out of the Pentax. Actually, my first two rolls out of the Pentax 17. I mixed together new chemicals, and I mixed them half of the concentration. So I used the powder, and I made new chemicals, but I did half of it. I was like, maybe this will work. And that worked out great because that's exactly, I poured the entire contents into my Patterson tank to develop and pour the entire contents out. So like maybe it doesn't stay as potent as long because I'm using all of the fluid. But I don't know. I think that, I can now like make a new batch later, and hopefully opening up those things and putting it in a Ziploc bag does not create a problem.
Yeah, but you developed your photos, and what do you think about them?
We'll get back to that. So, this whole like chemical thing is still fairly new to me, and I'll have to do like a snip test whenever I create the new set of chemicals from the ones
if they're still good.
Yeah, to see if they're still good. So we'll report back to that in about 18 months or something. And
yeah,
then,
next time you develop a roll,
and then go from there. So, what I did, I shot a roll of Fuji 400, and I shot a roll of Cinestill 800T, and the development went fine. I crinkled the 400 Fuji, and so I had some weirdness with that development.
See, this is kind of why I was asking. Is like, I feel like you had some strange issues with this film, and I wasn't sure if the chemicals factored into that or not.
I'm gonna say the chemicals did not, but I messed up loading the Fujifilm 400, and so I created some contact between some parts of like where you roll it up, where the film like was touching itself, and so it created some weird hotspots with the development, and so I had some issues there. And then additionally, if you go back, I don't know, like 7 episodes or something, when I was talking about this, it was like the episode that came out right after New Year's. I was talking about how I couldn't figure out how to load it initially, and so I like loaded it, and then I like pulled it back, and then opened it, and then reloaded it. And I was like, I may have ruined the first few of my pictures. I ruined like the first like 6 on the roll, basically. So those are all kind of janky or what have you. I'm looking for these in my Lightroom library so I can talk about them. Anyway, so I got, what was it? I think I shot 77 out of 72 possible pictures on the Cinestill roll.
So you got extras.
Yeah, and then I shot 75, I think, on the Fujifilm. The Cinestill one, I made sure to line up like right on the edge whenever I started. And so it was cool to be able to get that many photos. I got like almost 80 photos, Daniel. Yeah. It was crazy.
Bonus photos.
Yeah, lots of bonus photos. The Cinestill stuff looks absurd because it's Cinestill. I was probably like 80% success rate as far as hitting focus, which felt pretty good.
I mean, for your first roll through a new camera, that's not bad.
Yeah,
you've had much lower hit rates on some of the past stuff.
I missed some stuff just from the zone focusing. I think that I overexposed only a handful of things from trying to do like the f-stop priority, like whatever it is, bokeh mode. I kind of missed a few exposures just because of doing that. Had a few fairly low exposures also, just from bokeh mode, but that's all kind of learning the camera.
Maybe a couple of low exposures from having the lens cap on.
Yeah, quite a few lens cap shots. Let's just like, I'm looking through the 400 stuff, and boy, Daniel, the volumes are pretty high.
Yeah, I would say that for sure. Like that camera, even more than the other film cameras you shot on, it feels like you're giving up some image quality to get like really strong vibes.
Oh yeah, just really strong vibes. I don't know if I have any photos in here that are particularly clean. I am not a very diligent about like dust protection whenever I'm developing and scanning film. I kind of like hang them in a bathroom, that's been dehumidified or whatever by, you run the water, get the dust to settle, hang them there. Sometimes I'll just hang them without even doing that though. And
it just adds to it.
But it just kind of like adds more to the thing. It does better when like you blow them off before you scan them. But even still, like I could do better dust control. It just kind of adds more to the effect, and it's just kind of a look, I suppose. So overall, I think I'm happy with these. The 35 millimeter cameras that I have with like real lenses shooting actual 35 millimeter are clearly better.
Sure.
As far as like photo quality.
Well, and plus it's with this one, it's a half frame camera, so the grain is more pronounced.
Yeah, the grain is more pronounced as a result of it. I didn't do too much work on trying to get them exactly exposed with the scanning. The scanning didn't take as long as I thought it would. I kind of was a little more proficient this time using silver fast. But overall, I am extremely pleased with the stuff I got out of this. Having between 72 and 80 shots off of a film camera to just kind of shoot for fun and then have those photos is really rewarding. And it was like, I just like kept going. I'm like, look at all these photos that I shot. I developed 2 rolls and I had 150 photos.
It's a lot.
And I mean, I threw away the ones that are just total garbage, but I ended up keeping, I think, like 130 or 140 of them.
Pretty good.
And yeah, I like one of them, actually 2 of them ended up as backgrounds on my phone.
Nice.
I got this one with my dog and my lady. And then on the other one, this is your street, and it's all foggy, and you can see the light.
Nice.
So I'll throw some of these up on Patreon just so you guys can kind of see some of the horrible photos and how bad I am at cropping and scanning and developing film. You can really, really judge me. Just lay into it. But overall, like whenever I cropped these and scanned them, I kind of just like I left the framing beyond the photo.
Yeah, I noticed.
And so a lot of them have like white edges, or I didn't like the cut of the frame is like looks a little fringy almost as far you have to crop in just a little tighter if you want a perfect square photo, but I didn't do that. I left like the black and white framing around it, the white from the scan bed and the black from the fully exposed negative. And so I kind of like how that looks because it tells you that it's a film photo a little bit. And so that's how I've scanned them, and so I'll throw some up on Patreon, and you guys can hate on them all you want.
Nice. Now, do you have another role that you've started, or have you not started a new role?
I have started a new role. I shot some at the Houston Rodeo, and I shot some at the Austin barbecue cook-off thing, and so I have a handful of photos. No, wait, I didn't shoot at the Houston Rodeo. I brought my XT5 for that. What's the other role from? I don't remember, but I have another role I've shot about 10, 15 pictures on.
Nice. Do you feel like you're going to change anything about how you use the camera now that you've seen some of the photos from it?
I have a better understanding of how it's going to expose and how it's going to focus, and I know better to like watch for the cord being in the frame, because like you're not seeing the photo you're taking, so you got to make sure like the lens path is clear. And otherwise, I'm looking forward to kind of getting a more clean roll through it. I think that you are kind of struggling for light a little bit, even though it maxes out at like 1/350 shutter speed. It still is, kind of deeper focus, and the outside stuff looks good, but the inside stuff can struggle a little bit. So
yeah, nice.
Overall, I'm pretty happy that I got the camera, and it makes it a lot of fun as I just want to take pictures, because it's on film, but even more so than like just shooting JPEG, like with my XT5, I'm always a little inclined to want to leave that plus raw option on, so that if I get a really good one, I can go back and edit it if I want to. But then I'm always like, do I keep those? Do I edit them? And shooting on film with the snapshot kind of things is fun, because you just take the picture, and then like you're not going to see it for a while. So whenever then you go back, you're kind of reliving those memories a little bit. And with the half frame, I can just shoot.
Yeah. It's like once you take the picture, you get what you get. You obviously you can edit a little bit, but you're not getting a raw. And I don't know, when I saw the pictures, I feel like it's clearly like a certain look. We keep saying vibe kind of ironically, but like it is like a special kind of look that you really can't reproduce that exact thing with any digital camera. And I think it's cool that it kind of can fill this other niche of like, the pictures are going to be kind of bad. That's kind of the point.
Yep.
And it's just this extra, like it's a new dimension of photography, rather than like this has a lot of overlap with your other cameras and like maybe you use it sometimes. It's like, no, this is a totally different thing. Yep. And that's kind of cool.
It reminds me that I need to finish the roll that's in my AE1. I have like 20 pictures left to shoot on it. Anyways, we have everything to talk about here today, Daniel. So let's move on. Though there was one thing that came to mind, and I don't remember what it is. So let's just keep going.
Cool.
Okay, so I was going to talk about my V-mount battery that's coming, but let's talk about that after I get it.
Sounds good.
And then let's talk about RAW workflows.
Okay.
So I've been experimenting with shooting ProRes RAW using the Ninja 5 and the XH2S, and it is annoying is mostly the thing.
And you kind of decided to experiment with this because you feel like you're not going to be able to hold me back from getting a Pixis, and you want to see how bad it's going to be and try to talk me out of it.
Yeah, basically. And like the Pixis is different in that it is going to be Blackmagic RAW, and we can work through that with DaVinci Resolve. But even still, like, what is it like to work with RAW formats and dealing with those RAW workflows? Obviously, the file sizes are kind of big, and ProRes RAW is particularly interesting in what you can't bring that into Resolve. So, what does that workflow look like, and how do you deal with it? And so I shot one clip, mostly to just test workflow, not really a matter of trying to figure out quality. And I landed on just kind of a few takeaways here as far as starting to dip my toe into the RAW world. And one is, if you shoot ProRes, which is ProRes RAW is a format developed by Apple. And so if you're on a Mac, it'll just read ProRes RAW natively. You can just preview it. You can open it up in QuickTime.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that.
I don't know what it's like to work on it on Windows. I assume it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
Though all of Adobe's stuff supports ProRes RAW. Their media encoder, their converter, their Adobe Premiere. Sometimes I just blank on things. Anyways, it all supports ProRes, and so you can kind of deal with it within those areas. For the Mac, it's like everything basically supports it except for Resolve, because they don't, like, you have to get Apple's approval or whatever to be a ProRes thing. The other thing is ProRes RAW just falls directly into Apple's, I think the words I wrote here is militant obsession with HDR. Where, like, if you have an iPhone that's newer than a 12, you can't turn HDR off. You just have to be in HDR world all the time, because Apple loves HDR and everything has to be HDR. I hate HDR. Like, you can't, once it's in, like, my phone's showing them something that's HDR on my computer, you can't adjust the brightness. And I'm like, I don't want this to be blasting my eyeballs.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of experience developing and working with HDR video footage to, like, get that balance just right. But it's like a whole other thing, because you have to dial in the lumens on the top end of your thing, and it's just kind of a whole different workflow, and I mostly don't want to deal with it. And nothing that we deliver is in HDR, because it's not going to get played back in HDR.
Isn't there a setting in the camera for, like, video level or something where you can set, like, what the maximum is? Is that related to RAW, or is that?
It is related to RAW, and I actually totally forgot about that setting, and I don't know if it was set on the right thing, so I should go look at that.
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, point is, whenever you shoot in ProRes RAW, it does, on a Fuji, it does base ISO 1000, which means it's an HLG, and the Mac just interprets it as HDR.
Interesting.
It previews as HDR. It brings it into Final Cut Pro as HDR. And if you try to transcode it using compressor, it's like, you don't want to take this out of Rec 2020 or Rec 100 color space because it's HDR. Why would you do that? Don't you want it to be HDR? I'm like, no,
so
I
it's
don't.
almost like if you don't want it to be HDR, you have to, like, coerce it back into like the normal Rec 709.
You have to be real specific about what you're doing. And so the two different workflows that I tried was, one, I brought it into Final Cut to, like, mess with it and see what the export looks like and those options look like. And then I used the app called Raw Converter, which will convert ProRes to Cinema DNG, and you have to pay per device. So if you have two different cameras, you have to pay for it twice, and it's like $80 per license format. And then I looked at using the app Compressor, which is the one that you get from Apple if you buy, like, Final Cut Pro or whatever. And that one can compress it and convert it into whatever you want, and you can have it apply a LUT or have it, save down to, Rec 2020 and F-Log2 into an HEVC file or a ProRes file.
That sounds pretty capable.
Yeah, so, like, you can do all the things and do your compression. So a concept of the workflow is, like, you plug in your drive and then you feed it all into Compressor or to Raw Converter and export into a DNG file. So that's all mostly manageable. What I did learn is that shooting in ProRes RAW, the file size for a 2-minute video that I shot was like 22 gigs. And transcoding that into ProRes just straight up, not ProRes 4444 HQ, not ProRes LT, not ProRes HQ, not 4444, just straight up standard ProRes, was the same size. Like, when I did it with Final Cut, it was 24 gigs. When I did it with Compressor, it was 20 gigs or 18 gigs.
Me.
Yeah, so it's like, if you shoot in ProRes RAW and you can work in RAW. It's not any bigger than shooting in like standard ProRes, but then it's like way more modular, mobile. You can like do more things with it.
More flexible for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess this is another difference between ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW, because I know like looking at the Blackmagic RAW codecs for all these cameras, like all the Blackmagic stuff, there's various compression ratios, and so it seems like you can get smaller bit rates. But I guess with ProRes RAW, you don't have that option. Like it's just a single bit rate.
Yeah, it seems to be that's the case. Whenever you convert it to Cinema DNG, you get to choose your compression ratio. You can do like uncompressed or 1:3, 1:5, 1:7
Okay.
with that RAW converter app. And then Cinema DNG exports literally a folder that contains every frame of the video as a DNG file and a WAV file for the audio.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, and then you can take that folder and bring it in. Resolve sees it as like a single video file, but it's those files seem very awkward if you're not just bringing it straight into your NLE.
Yeah, it's a weird. It's like there's no container.
Yeah, and then because it's not, if you shoot in Blackmagic RAW in DaVinci Resolve, you can adjust the ISO directly. And you just like change the ISO. Whereas if you shoot in ProRes RAW and you turn it into Cinema DNG and you bring it into DaVinci Resolve, you can't change the ISO. But that's just like, that's how cinema cameras, that's what RAW is.
Yeah.
You have a sensor that has a base ISO, and then you're pushing the gain one way or the other. And so whenever you shoot, some cameras have dual gain ISOs, or dual base ISOs. And so you essentially have to shoot at one of your base ISOs. And then whenever you bring in the RAW files, it is at one of those base ISOs. And then you take the EV, the exposure value, and then you bring that up or down. And so it's kind of just a difference of terminology versus if you bring in the Blackmagic RAW, it treats it a little more natively, like it's like you're actually developing and like changing the footage live. Whereas Cinema DNG is maybe a little weird. And some of there's more to kind of the workflow as far as like dealing with the files in Resolve, which I found interesting. But overall, it seems like it's a possible workflow, but I'm having trouble nailing down where we would see the most benefit.
Yeah. It's also a little unfortunate that neither of us has like a Blackmagic Video Assist or something, because I mean, I guess you could just download a Blackmagic RAW file. I guess that's the answer.
Yeah, and I've done that, and I've messed with
those. Because it seems like there are enough differences in the workflows that, you'd want to get a feel for like what would it actually be. Because we use Resolve, like Blackmagic RAW makes a lot more sense for that. So, does that take some of the rough edges away? But I think it's good to be doing this investigation because, you want to see like how bad is it going to be to use these files, and also, what's the workflow like to take footage and develop it into some compressed format, like if you were filming something to deliver to somebody else, like if you needed to do that, like how bad would that be?
It seems like it gives you a lot more flexibility, but now you have to do everything. So there's no noise reduction.
Yeah.
Which is great, fine. Like if you're going to actually produce the whole thing and you want to do all that, you're going to do a better job in post by doing your own noise reduction. But if it's fast turnaround, that could be a problem. And like if you're shooting with a Pixis and you're getting Blackmagic RAW, like those files are going to be noisy and you're going to have to deal with it in post to apply however much noise reduction you want. And it seems like you do get a lot more as far as exposure adjustment capability. Like if you overshoot, you can pull it back a little better with RAW, but it doesn't seem any, like just like a little bit of playing around with it that I did, any like significantly better than just dealing with the Lumos on a log file.
Yeah.
It seems like log is a pretty good in between from shooting. Like if you're comparing it to JPEG and a RAW file versus like just a standard video and RAW video, log feels like it's in a pretty good middle zone for a lot of stuff. It's the white balance that like you can just straight up change the white balance and it's great. Whereas in a log file, you start pushing the white balance that much, the video file may fall apart.
Yeah.
So there's kind of some benefit to it, but from like at least the workflow that we do, I don't know if it would pay off.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be quite a bit of extra work.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep playing with it, but just kind of interesting at least.
Yeah. Sounds and you did this with the Ninja on your XH2S.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Ninja's finally paying off for you.
Sure. Speaking of.
Yeah, I thought it'd be interesting. I think I came up with this idea for a topic a few weeks ago, and then it's finally come up on the list. But I was thinking, like after all this time of buying camera gear and doing camera stuff, feel like there's some stuff I've purchased that I kind of regret, like just in hindsight. It's always easier to look back and like think of things you wish you had changed. But I thought it'd be an interesting question for us to answer of like, what are your most regretted gear purchases?
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic. I had a hard time mulling over this and deciding on this one because what I realized about myself is I don't buy camera gear unless I absolutely have to. Even though I want to drool over all of it, it's like the hardest thing to make me actually pull the trigger and buy something. And so there isn't too many things that I've purchased where I'm like, boy, I wish I hadn't done that. Though there are a few things that I wrote down that are probably worth talking about.
I feel like you also sometimes learn from me because I buy camera gear with much more regularity than you do. And so sometimes you can see like what I get, and sometimes if it's something good, you get one too, and if it's not, then you don't.
I'm trying to think of the word for it. You buy camera gear much more freely with what's the word I'm looking for? Where it's like a free spirit. I'll think of it.
Yeah, no idea. I just am who I am, Lucas. I can't help it. I see the camera gear and I want it and I buy it.
So what are some of the things on your list here?
Well, and there's not as many as I would have expected. I think like one that really stands out in my mind is a slider, which I actually have purchased two over time. So I purchased a little Edelkrone motorized one that I had for a while. Eventually sold that, and then I traded, like as part of a trade for some other stuff, I ended up with a non-motorized, like much longer slider. With the plan to motorize that one, never did that.
And so you loved both of them.
Yeah, it's just, I think the concept of a slider is really cool, like getting, like really controlled camera movement and like, a more cinematic thing. And ironically, like for the interview stuff we do now, like that's where it might actually be potentially kind of neat, but ultimately, I just feel like it just hasn't ever really like panned out. It hasn't ever really like, I've never realized those benefits from it. And it just seems like this other thing you have to set up. And if it's a motorized one, you have to configure it and stuff. And like, that's a pain. And the effect like isn't that great so as to be worth it. And I don't know. It's just like, it's always been a disappointment.
Can be pretty limited. If you need it for a certain thing, then having it is super helpful. But if you don't actually have that use case, it's like, having it isn't super helpful. The thing that I have on my list that is probably the most similar to that is glide cams. I purchased like a super cheap newer, glide cam, and I played around with it a little bit, and it kind of gave me enough chops that I got picked as like the glide cam person for that TV show thing that we did.
Which may have been a downside.
And
I don't know.
No, it was good. It was awesome to be able to do that sort of thing, and I really love glide cams and how they look. But since we shot that thing, whatever, a year and a half ago, I've since bought at a, like I found like, it was like $50. It's a $200, whatever, glide cam, like fancy pants one. And I found it for like $50 at a camera garage sale. And so I bought it, and I have never actually used it for anything that we've shot. And I don't regret it. I do not regret that.
Well, you got a great deal on it.
Yeah, because it's such a good deal. And I'm like, maybe I'll use this one day. I'll be really happy I have it. But it's one of those things where it's like, I really, honestly, for most of the stuff we do, a gimbal's better, and we're just going to use your gimbal, and it's fine.
Yeah. Glide cam feels like it's more for produced. Like it made sense for the TV show. It feels like it would be kind of annoying for something like event shooting.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll go ahead and put that on the list, I guess.
I think another one for me is the first big tripod I bought. So I mean, I think like most people, started with like some plasticky tripod, and that was me too. But eventually, I was like, you know what? I want to get a nicer tripod, and I did some research, and people really liked this one on Amazon. It was like it was cheap. It was like $125, $150.
I'm gonna pause you here. The way I remember this is I came over, and I feel like you were like, Lucas, I'm going to show you my tripod. But like you were preparing me to see it a little bit. You're like, I didn't know how big this was when I bought it.
The tripod was huge. So it's a very heavy duty, like I don't even know what the weight capacity of it is. Maybe probably 50 pounds or something. And then even the head has like an 18-pound capacity. It's a fluid head.
For all those 50-pound cameras that you're using.
Yeah. I think I just felt like, I should have a more stable tripod for doing video stuff. But that tripod is just too big. Like it's just big and ungainly. It doesn't pack up very small. It's heavy. And I never use it. I
It's
think
like
I've used it a couple
4
of
feet tall,
times.
collapsed or something ridiculous.
Yeah. I've used it a couple of times, but all the shooting we do, I don't use it because it's just like I didn't do enough research. The biggest problem it has is that you can't quickly adjust the height. So like it doesn't have a center column, and you can't, the legs are like 3 locks per leg or whatever. And so I think we tried using it for like a short film style shoot sometime, and it was like you'd set it up, and then you'd realize I really want this shot to be like 3 inches lower.
Too bad.
And that was just a pain.
Giant pain.
Yeah. And so I feel like I just didn't do enough research when I bought that. And because I didn't do enough research, it's just kind of a waste of money. It takes up space in the closet. Kind of a disappointment.
Yeah, I get that. I don't have any regrettable tripod purchases. My first tripod was an aluminum one that I inherited from my dad until it broke. And then I stood in the aisle for tripods at the camera store during their tripod sale for like 2 hours, checking every single tripod. And I'm pretty happy with the one that I have.
I felt like you did quite a bit of research into that, but was it just all at the camera store?
No, I did some research ahead of time, and none of it really came to much avail. And I bought a Suri.
Yeah.
Suri.
Yep.
Suri.
Yep. And it's more of a...
It's
really more of a photo tripod.
Photo tripod, but yeah, it's fine.
Like it has a ball head, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Filthy casual.
I know tripods are one of those things that you should, we're going to like really, really get into it, and you should spend money on, because it's like, getting a good tripod for like the work that you do if you use tripods is probably super useful and helpful. And like, if you get the right tripod, you'll just own it forever until it never breaks. And like, sure, I should probably buy your free blazer, but I've given a lot of thought, Daniel, and I just feel like I don't super need it right now.
Yep.
And I just don't want to spend tripod money on tripods.
It seems like the one you got has like, I think everybody needs a tripod like that, where it's really portable, and, maybe like for photo stuff, especially, like you don't want a big heavy tripod. And I mean, I have one that's about the size of the one you have, and like I take it on shoots and we use it for the B cam, and like, it's great. I think everyone needs one like that, and it's good that you don't regret yours. But yeah, I think we'll maybe get to talk later in this episode about like more on tripod things. But I just feel like, especially that one that I mentioned, just like perfect example of like, didn't do enough research, spent like a suspiciously low amount of money, and it's just not like, it wasn't really worth it.
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, I got one for you here, Daniel. So whenever I was doing my marathon training, I started to have an issue with one of my feet with my new shoes, and it was because I ran too many miles too soon in those new shoes. I didn't break them in properly before I did a long run. I thought it was the shoes that was causing like the plantar fascia issue, and so I went out and I bought more softer new shoes, and I was like, I'm gonna go with this wide shoe or whatever. I didn't really think too much. I was like, this is probably good, like having a little more room. Didn't maybe like think about it enough, and those shoes give me blisters almost every time I run more than 8 miles in them, and I should never have bought those shoes.
Should have never bought those shoes.
Yeah, I wrote that down because in the title here it says most regrettable gear purchases, not camera gear purchases.
Didn't say camera
and
gear.
I would say that running shoes are maybe a gear.
They are a gear, a single gear.
And within the last year, my most regrettable gear purchase is my Brooks Ghost Max. And mostly, I just don't need a wide running shoe. I need a not wide. Yeah. Which, for anyone who's getting into running, you're like, maybe like your feet expand whenever you run, so like maybe I should get a wider shoe. No. Your shoe should be pretty snug at the end of it. Not too snug, but snug enough that you're not like sliding around a little bit, or else you're going to get blisters.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, true story. So I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. I guess like related to kind of our larger conversation here, like.
Well, actually, real quick, I ended up running the marathon in the other shoes, the ones that I was trying to replace.
Yeah.
Those are not my favorite running shoes.
Interesting. How do you think you ended up in that situation though? Like, did you not? Like, was it like a learning thing where you felt like you just needed to experience it to figure that out? Or did you not do enough research? Like, how could you have avoided making that mistake?
Sometimes you just buy the wrong shoe, and then you buy the wrong piece of gear, and you think this was the wrong thing kind of initially, but maybe I can make it work.
Yeah.
And realistically, like after the first run, I probably should just returned them, took them back. And I was like, well, no, because I'm still like, they are softer, and I do need to kind of like work in some softer shoes for a little bit, and kind of anyways. And so like I'm going to make them work. I'm going to try different lacing patterns. I'm going to try all these other things and try to make it work. And the answer was like, no, don't force it to fit, kind of thing. And like I think that applies probably across the board for any gear purchase, where it's like sometimes you buy something because you think it's the right thing for you, and then you try really hard to make it work within your workflow, and it's just not like, it's just the wrong thing.
It's kind of the downside to buying things online, because like I remember when you bought that Fuji 10-24 lens, you bought it and then you returned it like 2 or 3 days later.
Yep.
And luckily, like you had bought it at the local store, and so you were able to do that. I feel like when you buy something online, it's like this whole extra challenge.
Oh yeah, returning things online,
pack it up and make a label, and it's a pain.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
One that you have on your list that I think I want to mention here is like small cards, small hard drives. I feel like that's a good example that I can kind of relate to. Of it's like I never regret buying the largest size for something like a T7 or an SD card or whatever. I feel like I've had way more times where I'm like, man, like I really don't know what to do with this 32 gig card, because I feel like I want more space than that, but like I've got the card, so I need to use it. And I've been very happy when I've spent the extra money to just get like larger storage. And it seems like a good example of like, I mean, I know there's kind of like a bell curve with storage, particularly where it's like, there's a certain price that makes sense, you know, and you can pay like way more and get a little more storage.
$1 per gig or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But especially for stuff that's like going to go in your camera or whatever, it's like I'm always happier when I spend more and get the larger size.
I put all of those things down in this category you have here called, do you regret cheaping out on any gear? And for that, it's like batteries, SD cards, hard drives, ND filters, and then sometimes like non-native lenses. But things like NDs and SD cards and batteries, I have found that in the past I have spent more money on the cheap versions. Like I had to buy 1, 2, 3 different varieties of the cheap versions because the batteries were failing, the NDs were discoloring, the drives were too small, I needed another one. And if I had just like bought the better thing, the name brand thing, the bigger thing that I was trying to like save money on or cut cost on, then I wouldn't have bought it multiple times.
Yeah.
And I would have actually spent less money over the whole period if I just got the right thing ahead of time. And that comes down to like you're trying to optimize for like your budget and what you need and trying to make the wrong thing fit. It's like if you need a battery to drive your Ninja and you don't want to use NPF on the battery itself and you want to put it on a plate, putting it on a Power Junkie plate is not going to put out enough amps because the Power Junkie is going to limit the amp draw. So you're not going to be able to run your Ninja off an NPF battery that's mounted separately, even though it was way cheaper to get a Power Junkie plate and buy NPF batteries. But now you have like all these NPF batteries, and really you should just buy one V-mount battery. And sure, the V-mount battery is like $150. Like, you're really going to buy a V-mount battery for $150? You could get like 5 970 batteries, or you could like buy cheap 970 batteries that are not even going to provide the proper amperage or voltage at 50% capacity. But you can get like 7 of them. That's way more wattage than the one V-mount, but they don't work.
All that's purely hypothetical, right?
Yes, all that's purely hypothetical. And really, if you just bought the V-mount battery, you'd been in a good place.
Yeah. I think it can be hard though. Like, and you've kind of, I think there's 2 separate issues here. One is like, do you buy the cheap version or the expensive version when you're talking about the same type of gear? Like, do you buy the cheap ND filter, or the expensive ND filter? And then the other thing is more like on a systems level, like when do you go all in on like, I'm going to start using V-mount batteries or whatever. And it almost feels like 2 separate things to me. And I think what's hard about it for a lot of people is, you don't necessarily know how you're going to use something or what you need until you use it. So, I mean, like, I think ND filters are maybe an easy example where it's like, until I really like start shooting, I don't know what power of ND filter I need. And, I could do the research and try and figure out like, this is exactly what I need. But sometimes it's just hard to visualize it until you're actually like out shooting with it. I mean, tripods are another example where you can read all about like twist locks versus lever locks and, feature A, feature B, feature C, but like until you go use it, it's hard to know, like it's hard to internalize those things.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's the difference between like just buying the larger storage size versus understanding your need well enough to get the right thing for your need versus having to like try a bunch of things and find the things that like don't work or like cost cutting to like make things work.
Yeah.
But on the ND side, you just go to like a similar exposure situation, and then you set up your shot, and then you like if it's a video shot because you're going to use an ND filter, you just expose it properly using your shutter speed, and then you count how many stops backwards on your shutter speed you have to go back in order to get it back to neutral, and that's probably how many ND stops you need.
There you go. I think I also think some people maybe are used to situations where the name brand thing is more expensive for no reason. And so they feel like I'm looking for an ND filter. I found a 4-stop ND filter on Amazon for $15. Like how much better could the Polar Pro, $80 one be?
Well, that one's probably fine. It's the variable NDs.
Yeah. The variable NDs are the biggest problem, but stuff like that. I think like you just have to read reviews or, listen to podcasts or whatever, because there are cases where you can save money on gear and where things are overpriced for no reason, but it can be like, that's definitely not a universal truth in camera stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, whenever I've had to cheap out on NDs, like whenever we did that music video shoot in the summer and like middle of the day or whatever it was, and we had a bunch of cameras and I was like, none of these people are going to have NDs, and they're all full frame lenses that I don't have NDs for. I purposely was like, okay, we need this, probably roughly this many stops. And so I'm going to buy cheap NDs that are that many stops and I'm going to buy them all the same brand because I know I can like color correct the tint and white balance for like a fixed ND versus their variable ND. It would be impossible.
A fixed ND and getting the same brand so that they'll probably all be bad in the same way.
Yeah, but now I have like 3 10-stop 82 millimeter ND filters that I'm never going to use again.
Yeah, I don't know what you're going to do with those.
Anyway,
I think when I was thinking about this topic, one of the big things I wanted to get to was, like you told that long battery adventure that you've been on, like starting with NPFs and then now you're kind of moving toward V mount. And I think we'll talk about that specifically maybe more once you get your battery. But I feel like maybe what makes sense sometimes is to do the Harbor Freight strategy with camera gear. So Harbor Freight is this store in the US, probably, I don't know if it's in other countries, but basically they have a large selection of tools. And that like the notable thing about them is that they're very cheap. So
they're so cheap.
Everything there is like a tenth of the price of getting like the name. Like you can buy a drill at Harbor Freight for like a tenth of a, DeWalt drill that you get at Home Depot or whatever. And it's kind of universally accepted that some of their stuff is really good. But overall, like you're cheaping out on tools. Chances are it's going to break at some point. Like it's not going to last as long as the name brand, like really good version of the tool. And a strategy that I've heard people use with that is, you're working on a project, you need, some tool that you don't have. If you don't know you're going to use it a lot, then just go to Harbor Freight and buy like their cheap version of that tool. And if that tool ever breaks because you've been using it a lot, that's when you go and spend like as much money as you can, like as much money as you have, like, for
all of your money,
getting the nicest version of that tool you can afford.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that strategy being like, don't immediately do that. But once you've kind of like proven that you need this tool and you've used it enough that you've broken the cheap one, just like skip any intermediate step and go get the good all one. In on the good one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as a strategy in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what it is. Like a lot of camera gear doesn't break, but I guess what I mean is like, I'd rather buy something like really cheap to kind of figure out if it's something that fits into my workflow, and then like try and skip some of the intermediate, like let me get something a little better and then something a little better, like try to skip those stair steps and go straight to like what's going to last you a long time, or like what the pro version would be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we didn't quite get to everything. I think we'll talk about the tripods a little more in a second. There's one, I was trying to figure out, is there like any lenses or anything that I've regretted buying? And I think that there's the one story that comes to mind, which I feel like I've already told on this podcast, because I think it happened after we started the podcast, but I sold my, I sold my Tamron 85mm 1.8 EF lens and my Fujifilm 35mm f2. And I sold both of those to buy a 56 millimeter 1.2. And while I was there, like they're like, also here's a Viltrox 85 millimeter that's in your native mount that's like $5. And so I bought the $5 lens, which was like fine. I ended up selling it and like losing money on it. And
it wasn't actually $5, but it was pretty cheap.
It was cheap, whatever it was. But I bought a 56 and I didn't like look at it well enough. I didn't like.
There's a used 56.
It was a used 56, yeah, and like I didn't run through like all of its paces, and I took it home, and it wouldn't like after it would you try to focus to minimum focus, and it would go click 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 click, and it was like just broken, and so I went back to them, and they're like, oh, actually we got another used one, and we'll just swap it out. So they swapped it out, and then that used one I didn't like super look at it. Like I looked at the first one, I like tested and kind of pulled at the pieces, but it was like that. How would I know the focus problem unless I ran through like a bunch of focus tests with it? And so I took that one home, and it was like coming apart. Like it was like you could pull the housing apart a little bit. And I'm like, oh great,
literally coming apart at the seams.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, cool. And so I took that one back, and then they gave me another one to look at, and I was like, I'm gonna look at this one a little closer, and I did. And like that one, I was like, look at this problem here. Like this isn't gonna work either. It has the same like issue. And so now I'm like, great. I've sold my 2 lenses. I have this $5 lens that I'm like just bought because whatever, and they don't have. I can't like get my 35 millimeter f2 back, and I'm down a lens, and I want something because the whole point was like I'm gonna get rid of the 35 and the 85 and settle in the middle, and now I can't settle in the middle, and what do I do? And I ended up buying the 30 millimeter 1.4 Sigma, which I ended up selling that lens later for a huge loss because I bought it for like full price, and then 2 weeks later they half the price of the lens, and you bought it for like because I bought it for like $330, and you bought it for like $200 or $170 like 2 weeks later.
You know, you talk about me buying a lot of camera gear, but I've had some pretty good timing on buying some of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Where you buy like a S9, they give you 7 lenses for free. Anyways, that whole situation was regrettable and frustrating because I wish I still had that 35 millimeter f2. That's a nice, sharp, very small night travel lens, and it was a great little lens. And I kind of wish I still had it. And I sold it to get a lens that I ended up buying. I ended up buying that lens later, new, because I knew if I had a new version, I wouldn't have these problems. But it was just like a whole bad situation. Sometimes you can't avoid those things. You just more like be careful when trading and buying used gear so that you don't trade something that you might regret trading and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of hard in the moment because a lot of times like you're trading in the gear so that you can like get some money available to buy the new thing you want. You know, maybe you can't justify buying the new thing unless you sell the old thing.
Yeah.
I've definitely had that experience some too. I think the thing that I mean, I haven't ever bought a lens 3 times and had them all be bad, but I regret selling my GH5. I had that, used that camera for a long time, really liked it. And then I eventually sold it and my 12 to 35 on eBay. And I don't remember the exact timing. It was sometime like after I had switched to Fuji, but I think it was probably like either kind of, like going back to fund that purchase, or maybe it was so I could get some lenses or something. But I kind of miss that camera, and I don't remember how much I sold it for, but I feel like I would have been happier like not getting that money and still having that camera.
I mean, you could buy a used GH5 now for pretty stinking cheap.
That's true.
Maybe you should just go get one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of have similar stuff where it's like, actually, this is more along the lines of, not cheaping out on gear. I don't regret any of the 85s that I've owned. I really like a fast prime at that length, and I'm actually kind of browsing once again to get a fast prime between 75 and 90.
I've been thinking you didn't have enough lenses.
Yeah, me too. But a lot of that was in service of me really needing the 50 to 140 telephoto lens and not wanting to spend the $1,100 or whatever on it, and trying to like work my way around finding $600 lens solutions and like lens converters, like getting an EF to FX adapter and adapting like EF lenses that I had on hand just to try to like get around not buying the 50 to 140. Whereas if I had bought that lens when I needed it, like a couple years before, I would have probably not bought a lot of lenses. Like I probably wouldn't have bought the 56-1.2, even though I love that lens, because it just overlaps with the 50 to 140, and most of the time it's better to just use the 50 to 140. So it's kind of like sometimes there's like a pro lens that's out there that it's like, I could buy 2 cheaper lenses and like not get this one. But if you get like the right tool for the job, it can kind of prevent you from overbuying other tools later.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I think it does come down to it being a little hard to predict that. Like you sometimes you know it, sometimes you don't, but it can be kind of hard to tell like in the moment.
Yep.
I think that's a big problem, and I think that maybe a lot of people watch YouTubers talk about gear and, everybody that does video stuff full time or like as a, major part of their life, like has super expensive gear, and I think that like sometimes you have to fight the perception that you have to spend like tons and tons of money, to get anything worthwhile. And that's not true, but it also is true that there are cases where spending big money makes sense. And I think it can be really hard to like tease out where are you at and like which of those things do you need?
Yeah, for sure. So, Dana, we do have another topic on here. You got a hard 20 minutes. And so I think that we need to go into this Daniel topic.
Yeah, I guess you're right. So yeah, I wanted to talk more about video tripods. I think it kind of lines up with a lot of our past discussion today. We last talked about tripods, at least in detail, in episode 45 of the show. So
let me just check the notes here. We are on episode 127. I don't even think I was watching F1 in episode 45.
You were a different person back then.
Yeah, whole different person. I didn't even have an earring back then.
It was July of 2023. That's when that was. And pretty soon after that episode, I bought or maybe before, I remember, I bought the small rig free blazer.
Yeah, I basically tricked you into that.
Yeah, did you?
I don't know. I was like, Daniel, just buy the free blazer.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and I did.
And then you bought it like literally within an hour. I'm like, Daniel, I'm not the expert on tripods.
Yeah,
why would you listen to me?
Yep. And I think it was a good upgrade for me at the time. Like it was the first, because the real motivation for me buying it was that I wanted to rig out my camera with a V-mount battery and stuff, and my existing tripod couldn't handle the weight.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe I do need a free blazer.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
Let me do some math later.
Yep.
No, I'm just gonna get a scale. I'm not gonna do the math.
So here's what I want to do. I want to briefly talk about like major types of tripods. I want to do like a quick review of the free blazer, and then tell you about some of the other options I've found in this space. And we're gonna try and knock it out.
Let's do it.
A reasonable amount of time. So
it won't be reasonable.
Yeah,
there's no way.
It's totally unreasonable. So I guess first thing, like
hold on. This small rig VB99 battery that I bought, the SE one, is like 560 grams.
Yeah.
That's over a pound,
Yep.
Daniel. It's that's a package weight.
That's just the battery.
It's like 1.4 pounds.
Yep.
That's heavier than my camera.
So that kind of leads us into like photo tripod versus video tripod. Why do you care? Why do you want one over the other? And I think there's some pretty key differences. The first being the head. So we mentioned earlier, like your Siri one that you have has a ball head, which is really good for photography, where you're just trying to like set up a single static shot.
Mm-hmm.
But for video, like most people use a fluid head because you can pan smoothly, tilt smoothly. Like if you want to get a moving shot from your tripod, it's just going to be like a little bit better for that.
It makes setting up the framing a lot easier because you can kind of move it around, set up the framing, and then lock it off.
Yeah, that's a little annoying on a ball head. It's like you have to try and level it, and it's a little annoying.
Also, one more thing real quick here. I highlighted the text here, and I guess this is iOS 18 feature. It translates or gives me conversions in the right-click menu on the iPad.
Oh, that's cool.
So 1.31 pounds.
Oh, yeah, that's heavy. And I think that's the other kind of big difference between photo and video tripods is that usually for photo, so like with something like wildlife shooting being maybe the exception, like usually for photo, you don't have as much weight on the tripod, I feel like. And you see more photo tripods that are, smaller legs, like not quite as robust, and kind of like directly along with the weight, it's also how stable is it? Because for a photo, you just need it to be like mostly stable for a brief moment while you're, like you got your shutter speed set to, 1/250, and you're going to click the button, and like you need that to be like kind of stable, but it doesn't have to stay stable.
The Sigma 400 to 600 f4 that we talked about last week is 8.75 pounds or it's basically 4 kilograms.
Yeah.
You put that thing on like a an A9 or an A1 Mark II, you're talking almost 9.5 pounds, Daniel.
It can get heavy, yeah. And like if you're shooting an NFL game or shooting birds or something, I mean, yeah, like your weight's gonna be a problem. But I still think like the fact that it's a photo, you don't need quite the same stability.
Sure.
Whereas for video, like if you're gonna want to film an interview, you need that shot to stay stable. And so, I mean, long story short, like I feel like video tripods are usually more heavy duty than photo tripods.
It also feels like more expensive.
Yeah.
By like orders of magnitude more expensive.
Yeah, I think typically so. And I mean, I'm sure somebody's listening to this that's a professional photographer and has spent, $6,000 on a tripod. Like I'm sure they exist, but like generalizing, I think that video tripods and I guess I'd say like
I would say that level of video version probably costs $60,000.
Yeah. And I think like I'd maybe even rather than saying video tripod, I'd maybe say like production tripod.
Sure.
Because I think if you're a YouTuber, running around with like just a bare camera, like popping up a setup real quick, I feel like you can get by with something lighter than if you're like, I need something to hold my Arri Alexa.
It took me a good like 5 seconds there to realize that you were talking about BARE camera, not BEAR camera.
Could be either.
I was like, what's a bear camera?
Is that those wildlife cameras that you put on the side of a tree?
GoPro?
Yes, I meant BARE. Cool. So, and I think like you and I both own, like mine's actually a video tripod because it does actually have like a pan tilt head on it. Yours is a ball head one, as we talked about, but we both own like, I'd say kind of like the standard style of, photo video tripod where like it can probably hold like about 10 to 15 pounds max.
You'd be shocked. I think mine can hold 19 pounds.
Yeah, maybe so. You better hope it can hold 19 pounds for that camera rig you're building up. Cool. Yeah. So that kind of led me to buy the Freeblazer back in July 2023.
Freeblazer.
Because I wanted to move the V mount, needed more weight capacity. And so I got that tripod, and the advantage to it was like it had a single lever lock per leg. So it felt like it'd be a little bit faster to set up. You don't have like the smaller ones that you and I both have 2 or 3 locks per leg. And so it's like you're fumbling with all these things to try and set it up.
And a center column.
Yeah. And a center column. And so the Freeblazer seemed easier. So I've been using that since then. We've used it on a lot of shoots. That one has the tripod itself has a load capacity of 55 pounds. But one of the shortcomings of it is that the minimum height is 31 inches. And
that can be challenging.
I feel like that's the problem we've kind of had with it on some of the shoots is that we set it up and, we're filming somebody sitting on a couch or something, and it's just a little bit too high.
Yeah, a little bit.
We've actually had 1 or 2 where we had to use your shot as the A shot instead of mine because your tripod would go lower.
That's right. Had to use my tripod.
Yep.
That's right.
Definitely the shortcoming of that tripod.
How many tripods have you owned, Daniel? 4, 5, 6?
Not 6.
4.
I think 4. Yeah.
Okay.
I think 4 is the answer. I mean, I had one when I was in like 8th grade. I'm not counting that.
That counts.
Yeah, more than 5. Other thing about the Freeblazer is pretty heavy. It's about 8.2 pounds, legs only, and that's the carbon fiber version. So there's a carbon fiber and aluminum.
Yeah, I keep forgetting you have the carbon fiber version.
Yep.
No wonder you're trying to charge me an arm and a leg for it. A totally reasonable arm and 3 legs.
Yep.
Oh, exactly. a head and 3 legs.
And I have a Manfrotto 502 fluid head on mine. That's like the fluid head is 3.7 pounds, which is a pretty standard weight for those things. So like the overall thing is 12 pounds that you're carrying around, and it packs down to like 39 inches. So it's not very short. Like it's pretty ungainly to move around. It is very sturdy. It goes really tall. Those are 2 big advantages. And I do think those single leg levers are easier than having multiple. Like it's nice that you only have to do the 3.
Yeah, it is.
But the things I don't like about it, one is it definitely doesn't go low enough. That's been a problem on multiple shoots. I feel like it doesn't slide, like the carbon fiber doesn't slide as smoothly as I would like, which is a weird thing to say because I kind of thought that was going to be better than the aluminum version. Maybe it is.
Dude, you just got to get some body glide.
You think so? You think I just need to lube it up a little bit?
Yeah, man.
Because it just doesn't it doesn't collapse smoothly.
Get some Vaseline.
Yeah. Maybe that's the missing piece.
Grease it up, dude.
Yeah, grease it up. And I guess kind of along with that, the locking levers aren't bad, but I think it's not quite as easy as I imagined it would be. I think both you and I were surprised when we had first looked at the small blazer versus like looking at it more.
I thought it was a single locking lever for all 3 legs whenever it first came out, and I was super pumped, and it's 1 per leg, which is fine, but you basically have to learn how to hold the center column, like the ball head, whatever rotating stick thing that's underneath, unlock all the things, set your height, lock them all, and then set your ball head.
Yeah. And they latch to the side, and like it's pretty hard to latch it. I mean, maybe you can, I don't know if you can adjust that or not. Maybe you can, but it just seemed like it's not super easy to move up and down. And kind of a little disappointing in that. And then the last thing is the legs don't lock together for transport. So it you can kind of end up with one of the legs sort of trying to like flop around a little bit if you're not using the case.
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot of downsides on it, but you can pick up a used free blazer probably for a couple $100 at this point.
Yeah.
I think the brand new, the carbon fiber is like 400.
400 with the head.
With the head. So it's like, it's not like cheap, but dollar for feature, I think it's still a decent buy if
I think
31 inches isn't a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And like, I think for us, it'd be great as a B cam. It's just like sometimes for that A cam shot, it just doesn't go quite low enough.
Is that why you're trying to keep it in the family, Daniel?
Yes, exactly. So started looking at some other options. You know, we've been doing more and more of these shoots where we go out and, have to do a quick setup and we're getting paid for it and all that. And so started thinking like, what would it look like to get something better? So I looked at a couple of different options and thought it'd be fun to go through those.
Do it.
The first one is the Potato Jet tripod.
It's $800?
Yeah. So this one came out not that long. Was it NAB last year? Was
something like that? Yeah, but then it took forever to actually come out.
Yeah. I think it came out in like November or something. So it hasn't really been out that long. But yeah, it's $800. That's legs and head. You can't buy it separately right now. It's all one unit. And what's interesting about this one is it uses a hydraulic clutch. So this one is what we thought the Free Blazer was, where there's a single thing that you release and then all 3 of the legs can reposition. And it kind of looks like a bicycle brake, where it's like a handle that you squeeze to deploy all the legs. And then they just like pop down, you let go of the handle, and then it locks. This one has a pretty low capacity. It's a little hard to find like the exact specs on this stuff because it comes with a head, and usually fluid heads have a much lower capacity than the actual tripod legs. So it says 13.2 pounds. There are videos online of Potato Jet like hanging from the tripod, and he weighs more than 13.2 pounds.
Just a little bit.
So, I don't know. I bet the tripod holds a lot more than that, but they say 13.2. Minimum height is 10.6 inches, max height 66.1, and then it folds down to 31.1.
Is that min height thing like super spread out legs, or is that like you have to hang the camera upside down?
I think that is super spread out legs. But one thing that's interesting about that tripod is it has a center column, and you can actually like pull that center column out and flip it upside down, so you can like hang the camera super low.
That's cool.
Yeah. So a neat feature. And that one weighs 8.4 pounds with the head, so it's pretty lightweight.
Weighs about the same as an aluminum small rig Free Blazer.
But this one's with the head, whereas that's
just
legs only.
Probably.
Big difference.
The aluminum one can only hold 17 pounds capacity on the Free Blazer.
Are you sure that's not the...
That's what it says. It says supporting up to 17.6 pounds.
But does that come with the head that you're looking at?
Yes.
If it comes with the head, then that spec is for the head. I bet the legs are more. The legs are probably like 40, 50 pounds.
It comes with a head.
Yeah. So on this Potato Jet one, super, super unique. I don't think there's any other tripods doing this. And it's definitely the fastest to deploy thing you can find. Like, I don't think you can set up a tripod faster than that. But I kind of think it makes it like, it's a travel tripod. This doesn't feel like a production thing. Like, it feels like, I'm a YouTuber. I'm going around to a bunch of places. I need to be able to set up a tripod like super fast, and that's why you go with something like this. Some people say it's kind of wobbly if you're trying to use a heavier camera on it. And so that's why I say, like, I feel like it's more of like a photo thing or more of a travel sort of option. It also sounds like it has a couple of usability things.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like when you release, like you squeeze the clutch thing to deploy the legs, and then when you release it, it sounds like it doesn't actually lock instantly. Like you kind of have to wait a moment or else like pull it open to get it to lock. And so that seems kind of annoying.
Yeah.
The center column sounds like it's really hard to unlock and lock. And the tripod head just kind of has some weird issues. So it kind of seems like the version 2 of this might be really good, but I feel like unless you need like the fastest travel tripod imaginable, I feel like it's kind of a miss.
Sometimes you just need the fastest travel tripod imaginable.
Maybe.
People are going to come out of the droves at you, Daniel. I can't believe you said this is a total miss.
I don't think
they're going to get you.
I don't think it's a total miss, but when I first saw it, I was like, I want this tripod for our work, and now I don't think that's the right choice.
Wow, Daniel, total miss.
What do you think? You think you'd get that tripod?
This one? No, it's $800. I can't spend that much on a tripod.
No way you would do that.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at this this other thing on SmartWorks website. It's a browser tripod, which is for $26.99, the reverse folding live stream stand kit. And it looks like the tripod legs go out into the traditional tripod fashion, which is just 3 legs, but that part's only about a foot tall. And then it has 4 telescoping segments that go straight up. And this feels like my speed. It extends to a height of 170 centimeters. That's what I want.
It feels
I want it to be just like a foot or so like, what is that, like 15 centimeters, and then for it to then extend from there another 1.5 meters with a single pull.
I don't understand why. I don't know what the point of that is.
Anyways. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's like tripods, you're investing so much money into this thing, which is if you can find the right one that works, which is, I mean, it's this thing that we were talking about for whatever, half an hour or just like 10 minutes ago, where it's like, it's real easy to want to cheap out on a tripod. And you can end up buying a bunch of tripods like Daniel. And then find out that like you should just bought the final tripod first, and then you would have been fine. But then he wouldn't have known what he wants.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's the catch-22.
Yeah, so it's like hard to find the right thing. And there's only so much content about tripods. I mean, this is probably maybe the only podcast that's going to spend at least 20 minutes talking about tripods. And like, this is the content the world needs, Daniel. Point is, it's like the specs on web pages suck for tripods.
Yep.
And the pictures are terrible.
Yep.
And every brand makes 50 different options, and all the names are awful. Like, do I want to get the BV BPA 760 or the BF BPA 760 or the BPA F 761? Well, the 761 has twists instead of latches, so probably want the latch version, but I can't really tell the difference except for this one supports 19 kilograms and this one supports 18 kilograms. Otherwise, the descriptions are exactly the same.
Yep.
And like, you just don't know.
Yep.
And there's no information, and there's only one YouTube video by a guy who made it 8 years ago, and you're like, it's not really the same product anymore. Or is it? Tripods are super hard to figure out. They're super expensive. And if like you've never had a video tripod, it's like, what's a bowl, what's a head, and what are the legs? Do I buy them all separately, or do I buy them in pieces? And are all bowls and all heads and all tripods compatible? Or do I have to like figure out like what thread size it is, and can I adapt the thread sizes? It's just really stinking hard.
Yeah. And
the good ones are between $800,000 and $50,000. And it's like, I don't know what to do here. And I don't know, of the ones that you've tried and like researched, I feel like still the SmartWorks Freeblazer is probably the best value for dollar for a video tripod if you can put the right head on it.
Pretty good value.
Just get the legs, but it does have some significant drawbacks as far as like the packing ability, and the legs don't hold it together whenever you fold it down, and like it only goes down to 31 centimeters and all this sort of thing. And like the Potato Jet one has some drawbacks as well, and it's like $800.
Yep.
And it's this really cool like headline feature, But honestly, like if you don't need the fastest deploying tripod, that feature doesn't carry this all the way. And so it's like,
absolutely.
that's maybe not the right answer for a lot of people. And like maybe it's like, I need something that's really portable. And like, do you actually need carbon fiber or do you not? Tripods are hard. Tripods are just super, super hard.
Well, and I feel like what's hard is like, like it's not an exciting purchase, right? Like who wants to spend $800 or whatever on a tripod? Like you think, I've got one already. Like I've got a $150 tripod. Why do I need this? And like, it's hard to justify that, but I feel like at least what I've seen with the things I've owned is that you do get more for your money, and it's just hard to know like when do you do that?
Yep. I mean, I think that the math has to be that the tripod should be some appropriate percentage of the cost of the thing that you're putting on it. And if you're at the point where you're putting like a Venice that costs $60,000 or whatever, not including the lens, the Cook lens that you slapped on it, you probably want to buy a really freaking expensive tripod. But like, even still, I take an XH2S, I rig it out, I put a V-mount battery on it, I grab my 50-140 or some other lens, and like, we're still talking maybe, somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of camera gear that's sitting on that tripod. I better trust that thing.
Yep.
Well, how much did it? What was it? You bought that at a garage sale for $15? Did you check to make sure they didn't put Body Glide on the legs? I don't think those twist locks are going to hold.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, why is it slowly sinking on one side?
Yeah, there's the stability thing, but I think there's also like potentially like the usability thing, depending on what you're doing with it. Like, if you have a studio setup where you're never moving it, then that's maybe not as much of a consideration. Or if you're like, I'm just doing this as a hobby, like I just want to try it out. Like, so sure, it's not going to matter. But if you're going like frequently and setting up shoots and stuff, like all those little usability issues are just like rough edges that you're going to have to deal with every time you do it.
Okay, so maybe since you've done a ton of research on tripods just recently, maybe you can answer kind of all my questions here, which are the last one I'm going to ask you is like, what are the important things about tripods for you? But let's start with, if you're buying a tripod, should you be buying it as a package, or should you be picking out your video tripod, your legs and your head and your bowl separately?
I think a lot of times you can get a good discount if you buy it as a set, and so that's a pretty good reason to do it. But like, I think it depends on how much you want to optimize, really, because I think there are like important considerations for both the legs and the head. And it's entirely possible, like the best combination of those things for you is a separate like head and legs. But I think for most people, like it's going to be more approachable to buy just a set, like a combo.
Do all legs and heads match?
They don't all match. There's two major different kinds, because you can get either a bowl or a flat base. So a flat base is like, it's a flat piece of metal and there's a screw thread sticking out of it, and like your head just screws onto that. That's one option. The other option is a bowl, where there's kind of like a ball joint connecting the head to the tripod legs, and that lets you level it more easily. And there are two different sizes of those, like a 75 millimeter or 100 millimeter. So you've got to make sure you get something that matches. You can also get an adapter, though. Like if you buy a tripod that has a bowl, you can get an adapter to a flat base. So that if you have a flat base tripod head, you can make it work.
Okay, so you need the right bowl head in the right size, or you're going to have to adapt them. You need a flat or not flat.
Yep.
And then whenever you're deciding your weight capacities, you need to make sure that the legs have enough weight to support the head, the tripod head, plus what you're going to put on it. So like the capacity of the head plus the weight of the head needs to be less than the total weight capacity of the legs.
And if you're buying for video, a lot of times you get a fluid tripod where it has like oil in it that makes it pan and tilt smoothly. And those usually have counterbalance, which is basically like if you have a really heavy camera on top of it, if you don't have it locked, like it keeps it from like slamming forward or slamming backward.
Right.
And so you also want to look and see like how heavy is my gear, and does the fluid head have an appropriate amount of counterbalance for that, to where it's like closely matching the weight of my camera rig.
The cameras that we use for broadcast, we have sandbags sitting in the tray underneath the cameras to give it more weight and stability.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you have like a lot of music happening that could be shaking your gear, or you're on an unstable surface and you have a very light tripod, adding weight to the tripod to hold, like secure it in place may be needed. So sometimes like you want those legs to support double the weight of the head, because you need to be able to put like hang your backpack on the hook underneath it in order for it to be actually stable.
You also probably never, and this is actually why I got the Freeblazer. I think my old tripod actually technically did support the weight of my rig, but I also felt like I don't want to be at the limit of this.
Right.
So you always want to like overbuy.
Right. And then some tripods have, what do you call those things that like hold the legs together?
There's either a mid-level or a ground level spreader.
Right.
And so like sometimes those are optional. You can remove it or not, but
that's like a safety thing to keep the legs from bananaing out.
Yeah, it's that. And it's also that on some tripods, you can use that to have the legs closer together. So if you're in like a tight space, like where you don't have a lot of like floor real estate, you can actually use that spreader to let you like have a stable platform, but have the legs like squeezed closer together.
Right.
Nice.
And some of them do it at the head of the tripod, or not the head, but like the top of the tripod. You can kind of click those into a different location.
Yep.
So there's still some other things on your list. Like you listed a Suri version and a Manfrotto version and a Satchler version, a few different tripods in here, but I guess talk me through what's important for you on a tripod and like what are you looking for?
I think the biggest thing I wanted was one that like I want it to deploy quickly. Like I want one latch or whatever per leg. I don't want to have to mess with all these different things. I think that really matters. I mean, obviously the weight, like the weight capacity is important, but like I'm assuming that's table stakes. Like I'm assuming like anything I'm looking at supports the weight. So I think that quick deploy thing matters. I feel like overall size and weight of the tripod, like when it's folded up, is kind of important. I mean, it's never going to be like a travel like setup, but I'm still like, I'm putting it in the car every time we do a shoot. And so like, I want it to be kind of lightweight. And I also want it to be easy to level. I think those are, maybe a couple of big considerations.
Makes sense. So did you land on anything?
I did. I spent way too much on my tripod, but the one that I got is the Satchler Flowtech 75.
Nice.
Which is kind of like one of the industry standards. It seems like I think a lot of people end up buying that as kind of like their
final tripod ever.
Yeah, and used a lot in pro work. Very, very expensive. Like the legs by themselves are $1,380. And that I think is like on B&H, that's listed as $600 off. So
nice.
I don't know if they're always running that deal or what, but very, very expensive.
So why'd you pick this one over? Like you have a Manfrotto 645 fast on here and a Sure SVS 75. Why did you pick the Satchler over these other options?
So a lot of it was it's the lowest weight option of the set, which felt like a pretty nice benefit, for transport. Some other things that I really like about it, I think the latching mechanism is the best of the set. It has a very large latch at the very top of each leg, and it's like a vertical thing. You lift it up to unlatch, and then you push it down to latch. Seems really easy to use, and I like having those latches like right there at the top because it's always going to be in reach. Like the problem if it's at the middle or the bottom is, you're maybe still having to like bend down to get to it. So it's nice not having that. This one has magnets on the bottom of the legs. So like when you go to pack it up, the legs magnetize to each other. So you don't have it like flopping all over the place, which is nice. It has a handle on the side at the top. So whenever you're like deploying it or leveling it, you have like a really nice grip to hold on to, while you're adjusting the legs. Kind of nice not having to like,
it's nice that that's not like the bowl or the camera. It's just a whole separate thing that this is where you grab. It's easy to hold on to. Yeah. Super handy.
So those are some features that I liked, but honestly, part of my decision was it seems like it's, trusted by a lot of professionals. People feel like it's really durable, really sturdy. And I felt like this is something where I don't ever want to have to buy a tripod again. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of use out of it. Unlike my camera, it's never going to be obsolete. Like until we're all using Edelkrone Tripod X's that set themselves up, it's always going to be good. And that's kind of how I justify it to myself is that I spent more than that on my camera body. In 3 or 4 years, my camera body is going to be feeling pretty old. Whereas like, I feel like 15 years from now, I could still be using that same tripod. And so it feels like a good long-term investment.
That Edelkrone is getting to be a deeper and deeper cut. I feel like we're a year beyond when we talked about that. I don't know if that's true. I'm looking at the Satchel website right now so that I can start pricing out my own tripod.
Mm-hmm.
And just as I jokingly mentioned earlier, they have 5 versions of the tripod Flowtech 75.
Oh yeah, I got the cheap one.
And there's like the ATIV GS, the AKTIV MS, the 2CF Mark II, and the 2AL Mark II.
Yep.
And they all have the same weight capacity. 3 of them are carbon fiber, 1's aluminum. 2 of them are aluminum. I'm looking at the specs here, and they're almost identical across the board. And there's no real obvious way other than they look slightly different.
Yeah. Yeah. The marketing on these things is not great.
Tripods are just super hard.
Yep. Yeah, they are. I don't know.
And if you get the right tripod, it goes hard.
I don't know. I'm curious, like, what your long-term path on this stuff will be. I mean, I guess you'll see how I like mine as we use it on shoots and stuff, but it just feels to me like the kind of thing where if you think that doing photo and video stuff is going to be a long-term thing for you, like it's not a fad, like you're probably going to be into it for a long time. It feels like you get a little bit of a nicer experience. Maybe you get some features that are like actually beneficial, and you get something that's going to last. And at least for me, I feel like I can look back over my past history of tripods, and I just kind of kept like stair-stepping up, spending a little bit more money. And I was just kind of ready to be done with that. And I didn't want to spend, $600 on a tripod and then feel like, well, this is nice, but like I wish I had these other things. And then later I'm like spending more and more.
Yeah.
I'd rather just like bite the bullet one time, take the budget hit one time, and then now I've got something that's like really nice to use, and hopefully will last a very long time.
This is very fun because before this we talked about our most regrettable camera gear purchases.
Yep.
So I'm just going to leave that there.
I think it fits really. There's a reason we had both these topics today. I think they make sense together.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then to answer your question, so I guess like one option for me is to hope that you don't sell the Freeblazer, and then I can freeload on the Freeblazer for as long as it's going to take me to eventually grow up and buy my own real tripod, which, as a point of reference, just kind of like an example of how long that's going to take. Do you know how long it took me to buy headphones?
Years.
That's all I got.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com. And you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.